In chapter 1098 of One Piece, we learn the true age of Bonney. In the present, Bonney is actually only 12 years old, which sadly validates the fact that she is the kid of a celestial dragon, and Ginny gave birth to her during her time of being a slave. It means Bonney constantly uses her Devil-Fruit abilities to maintain an older appearance, which shows that she is very skilled with her abilities. This demonstrates an incredible use of her powers. She has become the youngest person to wield a Devil-Fruit ability in the current story. Consequently, just like her mother, she has contracted the Saphire Scale Disease, which is also the reason why she is called Jewelry, like the sapphires that adorned her face. From what we know, Bonney is healed from this disease. The doctor didn't expect her to live past 10 years old, but today we know she is 12. The jewels have completely gone, leaving place for her iconic piercing. We suspect that Vegapunk is the one to have healed her, because in the beginning of the Egghead arc, she said that she's already been to Egghead, and Dragon says that he's going to reach out to doctors using his contacts, and we know he knew Vegapunk and considered him a friend. Vegapunk isn't just a scientist, but also knows medicine, which he confirmed it back in chapter 1067 to Chopper. So it's reasonable to assume that Dragon sent Kuma to Vegapunk and he succeeded in healing Bonney. Now we'll talk about this disease that potentially hides a huge secret and why I think it's much more important than we think. This disease is connected to two big mysteries in One Piece: the national treasure of Mariejois and the Emerald City mentioned by Bellamy. To explain this theory, we have to go back to Trafalgar Law's past. If you remember, Law was afflicted with a disease, the white lead disease. This disease was hereditary and caused by the accumulation of white lead in the victim's body after prolonged exposure to the mineral. No one could cure this disease. Only the Opinomi, which Law ate, was able to successfully save his life. If we compare this disease to Bonney's, then we quickly notice that it is very similar. Saphire Scales Disease is a disease which spreads everywhere on your body, taking on an appearance of a blue rock, and it develops itself in the contact of sunlight, which accelerates the contamination process. Law's disease, the white lead disease, also concerns a skin condition with the appearance of white spots all over the body, which spreads non-stop everywhere until the death of the person that's contaminated it. Bonney got the Sapphire Blue Scale Disease from her mother because it's a hereditary disease, which is the same for the white lead disease. Now, only one thing is missing to complete the resemblance between these two diseases. We know the white lead disease contaminates someone that is in direct contact with the mineral. So what about the Sapphire Scales? What causes this disease to occur in the first place? I believe that Ginny got this disease after being in direct contact from a crystal or a mineral when she was kidnapped for 2 years. When we link these two diseases and look at where the white lead started, which is in the city Flevance, also known as the White City, an idea comes to mind. What if Oda has already discreetly introduced another city that is as mysterious as Laughdale and the Ancient Kingdom, and the only city that I could think of is the Emerald City mentioned by Bellamy? The link we have between the Sapphire Scales Disease and the Emerald City is if we look at the original Japanese text. When Kuma mentions Bonney's disease, we can notice that the kanji used to show us the color of this stone does in fact mean blue, but it is also used to designate the color green, like the green from an emerald crystal. But it's not just that. The text where the doctor talks about the disease shows us again the kanji for the color green and blue, the kanji for scales, and above all the kanji for another precious stone called jade. And jade has a green color, which is the same as emerald. So the color of the stones of this disease wouldn't be totally blue, but there could be slightly green to it. Why this theory makes sense is because we know the constant exposition to white lead made the inhabitants of Flevance sick and put the spots of the same color all over their bodies. The Sapphire Scales Disease is contracted in the same way, by exposure of emerald, of jade, and by other precious stones of the famous Emerald city mentioned by Bellamy, cited as a legend, just like the Sky Islands, which we know are real. The celestial dragons have access to this ancient city, which is still unknown to us after hundreds of chapters, and to not get sick by it, they wear their bubble mask on their head to avoid contamination. Now, the link between the national treasure of Marijoa and this disease. We know that Doflamingo said that he knew the existence of a crucial treasure that resides in Marijoa, and that if he had the power of the Openomi, he could have used the national treasure of Marijoa to take over the power of the world government. But he needed the rejuvenation operation only possible by the Openomi that would stop him from aging. Now, if we go back to the sapphire scale disease, Ginny got it during her stay in Marijoa, and from Bonney's case, we know that it only gets worse as she gets older. Eternal youth, only possible with the Openomi, would be able to solve this problem, since the person never ages. That's why Doflamingo wanted Law's devil fruit. It would lead him to the national treasure of Mariejois that is linked to the famous Emerald City. If we go back and look at the Jade Stone, it actually symbolizes prosperity and eternal youth. And if we look at Imu, we know that Oda always hides Imu's face, and thus we have no idea how old Imu is. We know that Imu started the world government 800 years ago, confirmed to us by Ivankov in chapter 1086, and that only the operation of eternal youth, possible with the Openomi, would explain how Imu is still alive today, 800 years later. Knowing all of this information, we can conclude that Imu got eternal youth from the Openomi, and thus was able to acquire the national treasure of Marijoa during the Void Century, and it allowed Imu to take control of the world, exactly what Doflamingo wanted. Imu got the sapphire scale disease, but since her age was frozen, her body wasn't able to grow, and thus the sapphire scales weren't able to spread and kill her. This would also explain Imu's small appearance, because she is in fact just a child that has been reigning over the world for 800 years. The reason why Imu never leaves the castle is because Imu fears sunlight, so it imprisoned her in Marijoa forever. She has to stay away from sunlight, and thus also Nika, because he is the sun god, the only enemy she fears.